as of now. Hi, everybody. Jesse here. My first ever BLAB. Whoa. This is an attempt at a group coaching call. This is an attempt to kind of get some conversation going about problems, issues you're running into. And look at me. I'm going to turn off my phone onto vibrate and just kind of engage and see what you guys want to talk about with respect to innovation, collaboration, agility. Those are my sweet spots, and that tends to be what a lot of the things that I'm passionate about center around. And this particular virtual coaching session is going to be sponsored by Virtually Agile. I'm the host over at Virtually Agile, and the guys over there that make it wanted to make sure that we had a chance to mention them. This virtuallyagile.com is a remote coaching program on remote teams. And so that's something that I'm passionate about. I'm involved in that, and it's exciting. But that's that, and then this is us. So we're here just kind of kicking off a conversation. Now, if anybody wants to jump into the open seat, you are invited. Jump into the open seat if you want to say hi, if you want to start some conversation. But while that invitation is open, in the lower right-hand side, you can send a message. You can add in, type in a /Q, and then a space, and then say, I'd like to talk about stuff. And then that'll show up over on the other side about one of the questions that we want to cover, one of the topics that we want to get to. So Jessica, for example, she just typed in that she's finishing a meeting and will call in momentarily. And we'll look forward to having her be a part of it. But I'm looking at we got the Agile coach over at San Mateo, AOL, and good to see you guys out there. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys as well. Let's see who's jumping in here. Who do we got? Is this Jessica? Hey, Jessica's joining in. Your audio is not coming through, so you want to touch that a little bit. Meanwhile, anybody who's watching in, type in some of the questions that you want us to just throw back and forth a little bit, and we'll see where it goes. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So Jessica, while you're kind of playing around with the audio, let me just read off this from Joel. What are your thoughts about Scrum Master as an engineer in the team, as opposed to being focused 100% on SM duty? So, hi, Joel. Nice to meet you. So with respect to there's the textbook answer, and then there's the real world answer. There's the dogmatic and then the pragmatic. And the dogmatic answer, the textbook answer, is that if you want to really bring a group of individuals together as a cohesive unit, that's leadership. That's a full-time job. And if you want to be the one that's going to help them overcome their own internal issues and identify some of the external issues that are holding them back, and then escalate that and champion solutions, if you want to be that person that's going to be the one that people enjoy working side by side with every day, that takes work. And so the textbook answer is that you want to really full-time dedicate some attention to a group of 5 to 9 people in the way of a Scrum Master. If you read the Scrum Guide, scrumguides.org, and who we got? We got Michelle coming in. Scrumguides.org, and the official Scrum Guide, it mentions that the expectation is the Scrum Master is a full-time job. There is another resource called the Scrum Master Checklist. And the Scrum Master Checklist, a colleague of mine named MJ put together a list of 40 different job responsibilities a Scrum Master has to tackle. So it's a full-time job. That's the dogmatic answer. Here's the pragmatic answer. Many senior leaders find it difficult to justify a full-time equivalent for that role. Hi, Michelle, you're on the air.
Hey.
Michelle is part of the team with us over at Fuel Innovation at Alacrity Consulting, and so she's joining in. And then Jessica, it looks like she dropped off to play with some tech, which this is a new thing. We're kind of playing around with it. So that was the dogmatic answer. The pragmatic answer is that sometimes it's hard to justify a full-time resource for that. And so the default, a lot of senior leaders will do, is they'll look to somebody who has some seniority, the senior engineer, and say, okay, you be Scrum Master, because you have seniority. And so you're expected to be somebody that's going to contribute in a meaningful way. And so what that means is that you're only going to get some of the results that a Scrum Master would be able to bring to bear if, number one, there's somebody that hasn't been properly trained or doesn't have the skill set, the soft skills and the growth skills for it. And then number two, if they're distracted by most of their time of like doing work as opposed to making work better, then you're not going to have as much time devoted to making work better. So it might be that you have to start out with a half-time Scrum Master or with somebody that's doing two roles, as long as you know that there's a little bit of a trade-off there. Jessica, what do you think about that? Are you audio now? No. All right, so she's going to try again. One more time. So Michelle, you've been involved in some business environments in your day. Have you seen people try to play a leadership role that really weren't suited for it? They were more suited for technical kinds of responsibilities, and that somehow they got thrust into a leadership role when maybe they shouldn't have been?
Oh, definitely. Yes. They lack the training, they lack the knowledge, they lack the people skills, and they really need to learn. They need the tools to develop themselves, and it's unfair to the employee to put them in that situation without the training.
Yeah. Just a heads up, Michelle, your audio's a little bit digitized. I don't know if it's the mic or if it's the connection. Joel is weighing in here in the chat area, and he says, what I'd like to do is have one Scrum Master dedicated to 2 teams. So that way we don't have to incur the full cost of an enabler and a facilitator, but whether we can spread that cost across 2 teams. Management feels where we are in evolution right now, it's vital for the Scrum Master to have deep technical knowledge with the team. So part engineer, part Scrum Master. So Joel, there's some truth to that. What I found is that if you have been asked to guide a team and lead them, many times they're going to look around and say, who does this guy think he is? Who's this coach guy coming in here telling us how to do our jobs and be better and whatnot? Hey, Mark Cruz, join in if you. Okay, let me just see if Jessica's going to got our audio straight. This is the side plot, by the way, Jessica's audio, and we'll see if she was able to get that solved. No. All right. Play around with it a little bit while I kind of talk with Joel a little bit. So Joel, I've seen that, and I've struggled with this sometimes. I'll come into a work site and I'll say, so technical guys, I have a suggestion or two. Did you notice you're doing this? And they look at me like, who are you? You don't know anything about what we do. And so I don't have a lot of credibility. You can find many times if you want to lead people in a new direction, you've got to find some connection and build some credibility. And it might be that's around the technical skill set, or it might be something else. Sometimes I find that one way to create a connection with people is to joke about like your favorite science fiction movie, or something like that. Jessica, down in the chat window, people are offering you some tips. But I think there can be a very real issue about trying to lead people and guide people and coach people if you haven't established that connection yet. And it might be the technical work is the way that you make that connection. And so that's something to keep on the note. Michelle, I'm gonna invite you to kind of take a back step if you're interested in watching some other people jump in.
Okay.
Don't know. We're having some audio fun today. So Michelle, if you can take and click that X in the lower window, that'll free up your spot for somebody else. And then Jessica, we're gonna give you a few more minutes to play around, but then we're gonna open up the seat to somebody else. So if somebody else wants to jump into the conversation, any other questions about the Scrum Master, balancing those roles and those issues? I will say this, Joel, maybe you found this. I would much rather have a Scrum Master doing full focused Scrum Master duties for multiple teams, rather than having somebody who's playing half Scrum Master, half engineer, half tester, half analyst for one team only. And I'll tell you why I prefer that. Some people say, well, Jesse, didn't you just say they need to have some credibility? And so they really should know that one team really well, and then they'll be able to work together for better performance. But what I find is that if you have a professionally trained Scrum Master, somebody's gone through some training, maybe Jesse's training, somebody who's been doing this for a couple of years, then they know how to do it, and they've got credibility in the eyes of senior leaders as being someone who's got an organizational role. And so I find that given the choice between, if you have to spread people around, given the choice between having a tech lead be a part-time Scrum Master versus having a single Scrum Master who's sharing duties across multiple teams, I prefer the latter. Now, Joel, I appreciate your point, which is that right now it's kind of hard to move in that direction if they really want a strong emotional connection around technology skills. Fair enough. Start with where you're at and move forward a little bit. So Joel's response there, completely agree with that. Just not sure how to make the case to management who feels engineering skill is required to be a Scrum Master. Let them go with where they are, and roll with it there, and just see how it plays out. Because having something is better than having nothing. And usually, what's been the case is we've got engineers who are told, you do this, do it this way, do what you're told, and we don't have any kind of recognition that there's the need for some self-organization happening. So meet them where they're at, and then we'll see how it plays out. So Agile Twit, I'm not sure I know whose handle that is, but recommends recommendations on creating an innovative environment without forced innovation days. So we're switching topics now. We're moving from the Scrum Master topic over to an innovation topic. And on this one, this sounds a lot like Agile Twit. If you could do me a favor, I'm going to click on, okay, who is this? JC. Okay, so JC, good to see you. Now I know what to call you. Sounds like the practice of 20% time. And 20% time was popularized by Google, and then Dan Pink highlighted the practice of FedEx days that Atlassian does once in a while, and that is that you have specifically scheduled 20% time for experimentation, exploration, new ideas, but it can only happen on this and such a time. And so there have been some companies that have a lot of success with that, but I get the point. The point that you're making is, how can I just schedule creativity? How can I schedule the aha moment? It will happen on the third Tuesday of every month. That's kind of artificial. So point taken, JC. What I would recommend that you create a culture of innovation. And a culture of innovation is one that's fostered with a multi-pronged attack. The guys over at Transamerica are doing this with some real success. I saw them do a keynote at the Innovation Games Summit last year. And at the summit, what the chief innovation officer over there was focusing on was creating a culture of innovation with a couple of things. Number one, there was an open, transparent registry of ideas. And these ideas that they throw in, and you just let people know, hey, I'm working on this at my own time, at my own discretion. So not necessarily scheduled innovation days, but you do it in your own time. And then when you go into your timesheet, you can balance the workload, and the senior management understands that 20% time means 20% of your time over the course of a month, not necessarily every Friday or not necessarily every third Tuesday. The second thing he did is he focused on an innovation games practice to create collaborative events. There is a lot of silos in organizations, and a lot of times creativity just starts to blossom when we get some good collaboration going, scheduled collaboration events. So there's a couple of things that we can do to create a culture that encourages that. Another idea comes to mind, but while I'm rambling, I'm getting a little lonely. I'm wondering if someone could jump into the open seat and bounce some ideas off of me back and forth. So there's an invitation to jump in the open seat. The other example that comes to mind is Intuit. I remember looking. I was Googling around, trying to find a particular plugin for a tool, and then for one of the financial management tools. And I forget which one it was. It was something around QuickBooks integrating with something else. And here comes this little pop-up video where these two employees over at Intuit were, okay, I'm clicking. These two employees at Intuit were experimenting with this new plugin idea. And they were, they just cut a video and shared it out. And then that was the means by which the senior leadership would decide whether or not to invest further resources or money or funding into that. So we have a new chatter.
Hi there.
Hi there. You are, for the benefit of everyone.
Hello, Howard. Thanks for arranging this BLAB.
Okay, all right. Trying BLAB for the first time as well. I'm hearing a little bit of static on your audio. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear it. It might just be my speaker. But
it might be some ambient background noise that I can't really control. So
okay. All right. So Jeff is telling me the audio seems okay, and I think that's fine. All right. So for me, what I was looking, just to finish the thought. So Intuit has created a culture where anyone can propose an idea, and they'll even sponsor an idea that competes against their cash cow. So I don't know if any of you have used Mint. Mint.com is a website for managing personal finances. That was an innovative entrepreneurial idea that was started inside Intuit to disrupt their own cash cow of QuickBooks. Or rather, Quicken for personal finance. So they've created a culture where they've embedded these practices into their everyday culture, as opposed to having scheduled events. So how about you? What do you think? You jumped into the hot seat, so.
Well, you said you were lonely. I just wanted to actually just respond to your comments about innovation and creating a culture of innovation, and your suggestion, which I think is right on the money, about creating opportunities for collaboration. And what I wanted to do is just kind of go upstream a little bit. We talk a lot about innovation. Obviously, innovation is tied to creativity, and creativity is tied to imagination. And often we take our imaginations for granted. And so our work is looking at how to help folks to recognize that everybody's got not only imagination, but qualities of creativity that they probably don't really understand or recognize because it's never been given enough attention in their education, unless they're a creative, if you will. And yet, if you're wanting to create a culture of innovation, and you start by giving practical experience to individuals who don't think they're imaginative, don't think they're creative, and shows them, in fact, that they are. Once you have that sense of that faculty, chances are whatever your work is, engineering, marketing, finance, you're going to have a new sense of how to address issues. And so when you do create opportunities for groups to come together, you already have that precondition and an orientation that helps that collaboration go places that you just can't imagine.
That's a great observation. And that is that something along I'm trying to think of an analogy like you can't expect people to ride bikes until they learn how to ride bikes. And the way that you learn is through training and mentoring and equipping. There's another one, equip people. And so one of those ways that we could equip people is with some training, but also some time and some tools.
Right.
Because you might be stuck with an infrastructure, you might be stuck with some facilities that are really just constraining. And if you want to start to color outside the lines, we've got to give you the means by which to color outside the lines. So
and permission to create a culture for that to be okay. To take and play and creativity and games are all aligned in that way. And again, in our own work, we're always having a conversation that it's interesting when you think about a project team, particularly a high stakes project, whatever the stakes are. The propensity is to put together the team based on obviously professional skills and competence, and then there's an expectation that alone will carry the day, that everybody's bringing their A game into the project. So the expectation is that you're going to get into a new situation with new people, jump right into it, and be a top performer. In sports and in music, where you're dealing with bands, which are teams, or teams, sports teams, it's inconceivable that they would go into a high-stakes situation, performance, competition, without practicing.
Yeah.
But teams that are put together and thrown into the project often don't get the luxury of getting a chance to know each other. That's the big theme these days. But there's no acceptance of the notion that give it chance for that team to find space, to find itself, to find its center, so that when it jumps into the project, it really is ready to go. And so I think that goes to your point.
Yeah, that's you've also kind of like tweaked in my mind another stream, and that is safety. So creating an environment of safety where experimentation is encouraged.
Right.
And so the Agile cliche that people talk about is fail early and fail often. And as soon as you say that, leadership goes, "Oh, we don't want failure." But creating an environment of safety, like you said, for athletes, for musicians, that's why we have practice. That's why,
exactly.
Right? So to build that confidence, such that when you go into the high stakes environment, you've already been exposed to stress. You've been exposed to the stress of deadlines. You've been exposed to the stress of compliance reviews and audits. Why? Because we've had this safe space where we can practice what it feels like. The other one that comes to mind is in the Phoenix Project, the book, which is a fantastic read if you guys haven't read it. And that is by fire drills. If you're in an IT environment and you're trying to do and you just assume that everything works great, how about we have the chaos monkeys? So they actually write scripts that simulate failure into the operating environment, and you literally practice fire drills. You practice being under stress so that when it happens, you're calm, you're controlled, and you have an environment of safety because you've already been through these drills. And so it strikes me as that one way to create an environment of safety in which creativity and innovation can thrive is to practice what it feels like when you are under all of that stress.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. So JC's mentioning there should also be a learning takeaway with each failure, which is what I like to coach teams. This is This is, I think, often the one of the challenges that we run into, which is that we run into a crisis, we solve or a failure, we address it, we solve it, and then we move on. The idea of a retrospective, it might be that we talk about it, but there isn't a lot of action that comes out of it. So the idea of learning is not just to discuss and to digest, but also to do. I mean, if you're not doing anything with the failure, if you're not doing anything with the learning, then why are we doing it? I don't know if you guys have seen that where the retrospective or lessons learned or failure response, it tends to be more of going through the motions. Has anybody seen that?
I haven't seen it. I'm not a programmer or a coder or a tech person, but
Right.
very interested in the field, particularly the psychology of teams and especially virtual teams. But where I have seen it is in big corporations where compliance is a legal issue. And so
Right.
you have all of these workshops and just people are like zombie, like they're the Walking Dead in these exercises because it's just so routine and rote that people tune out, and that might be an equivalent. You got to do it, but they're not there.
Indeed. All right, so we've got an open seat. If you guys want to join the two of us in throwing out some thoughts there, I appreciate those of you who are typing in on text because we are getting some interaction here. But I'm seeing people like Claudia. Claudia, if you want to jump into the hot seat, you're invited. Or Monica, maybe if you want to jump in. So the more the merrier. If you happen to have the video cam that we've got set up. Other things on your mind that you want to talk about? We talked a little bit about creating a culture of innovation and safety. We've talked about the role of, I guess, productivity innovation in the way of a Scrum Master. How do we innovate better ways to collaborate? So any other topics on people's mind? We're about halfway through the hour, the lunch hour, as it were, on the East Coast. Open to some other stuff. Jeff is throwing out something. How do you begin to influence long-time institutional teams to accept disruptive innovation? Many times their vision has blurred in the first place. This is there's a lot of I heard about this the organizational antibodies. I heard about this phenomenon where any innovation that is not sprung from within, that comes from the outside, whether it's a competing idea, a competitor, or whether it's a new hire, or whether it's a new leader, whatever that disruptive idea is coming in, the organizational antibodies will self-organize around to consume and devour it to make sure it doesn't take over the status quo. There's also the classic book, Who Moved My Cheese? So I've gone into work every day and I know that what makes me successful is this kind of approach to things. There's also the not invented here syndrome. So we hear this pattern over and over again where we want to create a culture of innovation. We want to create new ideas and get out there. But as soon as we're exposed to them, oh, it's scary. I don't know. I don't like this.
But there's a kind of, sorry. Oh, I'm really sorry. In Oxfam, we used to call this a hot pursuit. To your point, exactly to your point, and it goes back to the earlier point about creating a culture or an environment where people feel safe. It really is a primal issue. It's not an organizational issue in the sense that if you're in a fight or flight mentality, everything humanistic kind of closes down. It's really a reptilian thing. It's about, I'm going to protect myself at all costs. And in an environment where the managers or the owners are manifesting bullying behaviors or toxic behaviors, then it's even more natural to close down. And when you're closed down, it's very hard to be creative or innovative or imaginative, except as it relates to survival. So I'm not going to put my, in China, there's an old saying, the raised nail gets hit first. So I think it goes back to that. So when you have an organization as a whole, I think to your point, it is cellular and it is emotional. And unless the stakeholders are absolutely committed to being fearless and taking a hard look at their culture and recognizing that there might be toxicity here, we may not be modeling the behaviors we need to, then it's going to be very difficult to tap into that energy.
Well, self-awareness in leaders is always something critical. We're not emulating the behavior that we want to see in others. That's always huge. Joel here is mentioning that he's reading the book Switch, which, if you guys haven't read, is a fantastic New York Times bestseller about change management. Another, all of the specialty books that I read these days, they're not text, they're New York Times bestsellers. Why? Because I can actually enjoy them. If you enjoy reading the book, you're probably not going to learn anything. So Switch is fantastic. Another one is called The Power of Habit. And so you started talking about like this primal reptilian brain. There's the neurology of growing new skills, and that is it starts in the prefrontal cortex in the Homo sapien brain. And then as you start to, because you're using all of your energy to learn new skills and new things like Agile or whatever, and then it starts to move into you get a little bit more acclimated, and you can use different parts of your brain to share the load. And over the course of time, it moves into a day-to-day habit, like the day-to-day habit of pushing off defects, or the day-to-day habit of doing whatever your boss says, or the day-to-day habit of checking your email and going to meetings and not doing any real work. And that's just buried into your basal ganglia, which is part of the autonomic system, which is the part of the brain you use during your morning commute. And in your morning commute, you just go through and you just stop, I'm already here. How did I get here? I don't even remember driving, because it's a habit. So that's one part of the neurology. The other part of the neurology that Joel's mentioning in the book Switch is the not the basal ganglia, the corpus callosum, which is part of the limbic system. And that limbic brain is where all decision making happens. And Simon Sinek's TED Talk, where he says people are motivated not by the what of an idea or a methodology or a strategy. They're motivated by the why. Nobody buys what you do, they buy why you do it. People buy with their hearts, and then they justify later with their minds. So if you can explain to people that this new innovation is going to help them grow and solve immediate pain, that's going to give you more, instead of saying, this is going to increase our margins and it's going to increase shareholder value. That's like brain talk as opposed to heart talk.
Picking up on that heart talk, I'm in a dialogue with people who are involved in this whole growing phenomena of design thinking, and there's a real parallel here in the sense that in the context of design thinking, and I think again, from my understanding, and I'm learning about the Agile community, having the customer involved in the dialogue is intrinsic to the end result. And getting that client involved right from the get-go. And in design thinking, it's all about seeing whatever the challenge is exactly from the eye of the user, and having the empathy to be able to do that. So is that kind of what you're referring to on some levels?
Yeah, to some degree, to some level, that there's definitely this kind of cognitive dynamic when we talk about change and when we talk about creating the right new culture that we want. So Joel was saying that he uses Simon's talk as well in his workshops. JC has an interesting thing when we talk about creating this environment and change. says he's found that having buy-in at the federal level, we'll say that, and the metaphor would also be at the executive level in a corporate environment, enabling at the state level or the kind of the mid-level, and then motivation down on the ground. And so I think JC, that's a fantastic analogy, whether we're talking about the government sector, we're talking about the corporate sector, having buy-in, vision, and then enabling here at kind of like that mid-level where we provide the structure, the infrastructure, the organizational structure, the mechanisms, and then telling people on the ground, giving them the motivation of what's in it for me, what's in it. Here's one. I don't know if you've heard this. Some people will be like 5 years away from retirement. They're just not motivated for change. They're just, I'm only a couple of years away, and I like going to professional development events. I like learning new things, but I'm an old dog. I've had people share this with me directly, and I think it's not so much your stage of life as it is your frame of life, because there's a lot of lifelong learners that will continue to experiment crazy new ideas regardless of their age. But then other people are just, my personality, I'm ready just to kind of walk into the sunset a little bit. I don't have the energy to overcome a lot of these barriers.
I'm an old dog, and I own it. But here's the kicker. If you were to Google the phrase Encore Generation, it's a very interesting time in the sense that we've got 4 generations working in the workplace together for the first time ever. The second thing is, the reason for that is because, at least within the West, life expectancy has just increased dramatically. And people have, on average, an extra 10, 15 years of life before they kick the bucket. And so the people that you're talking about actually still have probably 10 and 15 years of real, I don't know how you feel about it, but Harrison Ford, they've just cast to do another Raiders of the Ark. I thought he's a little long in the tooth for it. I think it would have been better if he did Blade Runner, but, the point is, there's life in the old dog still. And so those folks that you're talking about, so it is a question right at the get-go of kind of inculcating a feeling that this life is an adventure. I'm going to continually learn. I'm going to continually enhance my skills. And that's why you have great artists in their 90s creating masterworks, So that's what we want to aspire to, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that one, because when Harrison Ford announced, I don't know, he doesn't have the same step, but that doesn't mean he can't contribute. Jane Fonda, she did a talk a couple years ago where she was talking about the third act.
Exactly.
When you're a youth and you're kind of like building out your career, you're building out you got your foundation, your degree. And then you move into middle age where you've established sort of that you've got this seniority, and then you're pretty much supposed to be done. And she's like, no. I got like a couple of decades left. It's time for my third act. And so exactly. I appreciate where you're coming from, which is that it's not so much your stage of life as it is your frame of life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is good conversation. JC here jumping in. Your Scrum team should be in more control than Harrison Ford's running motion. Yeah, my favorite one, there was one he did, and this is a complete segue, but he did a movie a couple of years back where there was a home invasion thing, and these gangsters were invading this rich guy's house, and he was the rich guy, and I remember thinking, how is he beating up these crooks that are 40 years younger than? Hey, it's a good movie. But that's changes the phenomenon of change. Maybe if you guys are interested in exploring this with me, it's been on my mind lately. But also about where people gravitate and where they kind of where they end up being. I was at last week. I was at the Scaled Agile Framework training, and we were talking about overcoming organizational silos. that people have their tribes. And a lot of times we see in organizations that the tribe that we form is not so much around a particular product line to a customer, or it's not around a particular mission out to a given segment of the market, but rather it's mostly about my job description. So we have engineers that are organized around, and we have legal teams that are organized, and then document teams that are organized. And so there's just something about when we're talking about like moving change toward a positive direction, people will cling together into their own core groups, which I guess is, affinity, that's familiarity. And so the question I was asking is, why is it that we do that? Why do we organize around what's familiar instead of organizing around what's valuable and motivating? Why is it that large organizations, whether it's government organizations or corporate organizations, tend to organize in that direction? And I've heard a couple of thoughts on this, and I don't know what you guys think about large organizations and how they're set up in a way that prevents the kind of change and prevents the kind of culture that we're looking for. Anybody have any thoughts on that phenomenon? JC jumping in, fear of the unknown and protectivism. There is some. That goes back to who moved my cheese. We're working day in, day out. We're accustomed to a certain way of doing things, and we attach to people that we know. This goes back to Joel's point, where in order to appoint a scrum master who's going to help us grow and nurture, we really want him to be one of us. We really want him to be someone that we can identify with. And as opposed to, it's one thing to have strange new ideas. It's another thing to hear strange new ideas from a strange new person like Mark Cruz.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to see you, Mark. How you been?
How you doing, Jess? So I just wanted to piggyback on what you guys were saying. Yes, change is difficult, especially for those that are like at the very tail end of the baby boomer generation, born in '64. So it's like the last year, and the way we've grown up and the way we've matured, I guess, we've been able to adapt to the leading edges of technology as we get older. And when it's time to adapt new things, I know recently on a recent engagement I'm working on, it is with a very established, long, historic financial company. And just moving them to the Agile framework is like you were talking to somebody in a senior citizen's home like they never saw a computer before, an iPhone. It's really difficult for them to make that change. They're used to certain technologies, but don't change my flow. Don't change the way I do things. I'm used to being productive the way I am right now. And that's one of those things that it's very difficult that you're going to have to overcome.
I have a colleague who's also like you, working in the financial sector with a large institution going through an agile transformation. And, his bottom line is that fintech is just going to eat these guys for lunch. They're not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for the phenomenon where we've got there's the office mail for the day. There's a lot to be said with the phenomenon of the familiar. There's the work that I know how to do, and then there's the work that we all know that we do together, and groups of a feather flock together, and things like that. And so, it's hard. It's work, right? There's emotional work that happens whenever we're venturing into the unknown. And where did I hear this? This was in the Power of Habit. And in the Power of Habit, make the point that willpower is a muscle. willpower is a muscle. So the example they give, if you're trying to like diet and exercise, and you spent all day trying to exert your willpower to get through the day, to not blow your top at this unreasonable manager, or you've spent all day using your willpower to motivate yourself to get some work done, and you get to the end of the day, you're spent because the willpower that you've had at your disposal has already been utilized. So likewise, if we're creating an environment where people are just, they're not motivated, they're exhausted, they're overutilized, they're running into barriers, they're not going to have a lot of willpower to venture into the unknown of a disruptive idea, to enter into the unknown of a new way of working. So I think that goes back to your point where you were making that that we want to create the space. We create the space for these kinds of things where people will have some of that willpower preserved at the end of the day. We'll be able to see more of momentum. It's just a fascinating book. It keeps popping back into my head, that Power of Habit book.
I mean, I'm going to come back to your point, and then I'm going to get off. But this notion about big organizations, along the lines of the ones that you're working with, but you say, why is it gets to a certain point, and then it's kind of like a kind of inertia, kind of a stasis takes over. I'm reading about teams, as I mentioned, studying teams, and Jeff Bezos' rule of 2 pizzas. A team should not be bigger than, how much it takes to feed, 2 pizzas. And we know from practical experience, a small team is more agile, not because it's professing agile methodology or concept, it's just because a small team is more agile, less people, easier to maneuver. But if I go back to the primal thing, I just recently watched a movie from, I guess the 90s or 80s maybe, called Quest for Fire. That cavemen out there, and they were not humans at that point. Were not top of the food chain. So being out there, you're in the unknown continuously. And you're continuously facing predators that want to eat you. It's high stress environment, and yet culture evolved out of that, life evolved out of that, civilization evolved out of it. There's something in us that is able to thrive in that kind of a situation, and find fire, create tools, create security, and so I guess it's a question of evolution and revolution, and again, I mean, you read about it all the time in social media about the biggest companies in the world 25, 30 years ago are not the biggest companies in the world today, and it's just such a different place. So there's more, I think, more opportunity at a cellular level in an organization as we old guys go into retirement or whatever, as millennials come in and as X and Y come in, the absolute nature of work and organizational structure is going to organically change anyways, So I think you in particular are helping to mediate that change in a role as Scrum Masters or Agile coaches. I mean, because again, you're kind of like the tuning fork that helps that team hit the right pitch, right?
Yeah. There was another coach over at AOL, Matt Lloyd, who told me, reminded me of the concept of the adjacent possible. And the adjacent possible with respect to this is the status quo. And so when we start talking about new ideas, new practices, new products, it becomes hard to think of it beyond, bye. And that becomes what's achievable, and because it takes a certain amount of energy to move. And so this is why we tend to say that young people are an asset with respect to innovation, because they bring energy to the table, and we want to leverage that energy to move from where we are to where we can go. But you might be able to you might be able to create your own source of energy. So Mark, you said you're an older guy, and you're in this business of making change. How do you energize yourself to move forward relative to all these young upstarts?
So that's a great point, because the fact is that if you're not bringing an energetic tone to your teams or your team that you're coaching or your scrum master to, then I guess it starts and it fails with you and when you're bringing to the team. So my thing is, I know how Agile works. I know how Scrum works. I've seen it fail. I've seen it succeed. And my deal is to bring the best face forward so that way they can try to have as good of an opinion for the transformation that we're going through or the next steps that we're going through. Like the last guy said, basically, when you have this dichotomy of ages where you have spectrums from baby boomers all the way down to millennials, the attention spans are different. The want and the way to achieve the way they work is all different. So you have to try to basically tap into those. Being aware psychologically, being aware mentally, I think gives you the edge to bring and understand what your teammates are doing to push them in the right direction. To be that servant leader for them. Yeah.
Bringing your own energy to the table. And one way to do that, I'm thinking, is by getting connected to your why. That goes back to that Simon Sinek thing. Why are you here? Why are you working at this company and not at the other company? And don't tell me it's because it's a great commute. There's got to be some reason for it. So, you're working in the financial institution because, man, that's a challenge. It's not a walk in the park, but if I can take this, I can take anything, right? So this is about the challenge.
Yeah. It's about taking the hits and keep on coming, I guess. That Rocky from the last Rocky movie or something like that. It's getting hit, getting back up, and keep on going. And within the financial institutions, I guess they're so set in their ways to doing things in, I guess, the way they've done it from time immemorial. So that what you try to do is you're bringing something new to the table. And at times, you're going to get a substantial amount of pushback. But and because I guess that the way that most companies, especially financial institutions, they go through these ebbs and flows where they're going to try the latest technology. They're going to try the latest methodologies. And they know that they can survive past them. So you have to say, hey, listen, I'm not just the latest flavor of how we do things. This is how things are going to be done going forward. And you're either part of it or you're not.
You're either on the change train or you're not on the change train. Yeah, there's that part of the conversation. JC's chiming in. He's like, the large organization I'm consulting with has had successes so far in adopting Agile because that the federal support, the senior level, they understand their threat is no longer old school financial institutions, but rather companies like Google and Amazon. So there's nothing like competition to motivate action. There's another book which I'll admit I haven't read because I can't get past the title. The title gives me all I need. What got you here won't get you there. That's pretty much the whole story, right? I mean, what made us successful as a large organization. So it may not be what's going to make it. So there was I was at Marriott's headquarters, Marriott International, over out in Maryland a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed that man, this lobby is gorgeous. This is modern. I'm seeing little co-working spaces over here. There's a walking desk, and man, this is fantastic. And then one of the employees was saying, yeah, they built it last year because they hadn't changed any of the decor in 20 years. And so you get good at something, and then by riding the success train, you just kind of get good. And then finally, here comes some people saying, "Well, Mr. Vice President, we're not attracting any talent because they look at your lobby and they think these people are stuck in Mad Men, and we need to be a little bit more relevant and disruptive." And so that's why Google. It's not so much that we want to be like Google or we want to be like Amazon. We're different, but it's more that they're going to eat our lunch. And so we need to adapt in order to grow around. So competition, here's one thing that's challenging though. I noticed that companies can be responsive to competition, but professionals tend to be less responsive to competition. So I'm a Java engineer. I program in Java. That's what I do. You notice the Java's been losing a ton of market share over the last 10 years. So what are you going to do about that? Oh, that's what I do. It's what I'm a COBOL engineer. That's what I do. Okay, good luck with that. What is it about people? This probably is going to be our last topic for the afternoon, but I don't know what it is, but people tend to be less adaptive in the face of change relative to organizations, even though they might be a little bit bigger. So it's kind of an interesting thought. This has been a lot of fun, guys. We're coming up at the top of the hour, Mark. Appreciate you jumping in and being a part of the conversation. And appreciate all of you guys listening in as well. I don't know about you. I would love to do this again. And next time, and next time, what we would like to do is have you come with your audio and visual, your AV stuff already tested, so that you could jump in, Claudia, so that you could jump in, Jessica. So next, and then so that when we see you, we'll be able to chat with you. So that would be a lot of fun if we do this next time. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to kill the recording here, declare victory, and say thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining in. This is a fun experiment. There's some technical nuances to get used to a little bit. But yeah, I think we're going to keep doing this as a way to kind of create a group conversation. How do we coach each other through to higher levels of innovation, collaboration, agility, things along those lines. So Jeff here, who's my producer, is saying that we'll open this BLAB session next time a little bit early to give everybody a chance to test out their AV, and all that. Thank you guys. Thank you for the props and the chat. This is Jesse. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jesse Fewell. That's where my morning fuel thoughts are. Again, this BLAB was brought to you by virtuallyagile.com, your source for remote coaching on remote teams. Stay tuned for more of these BLAB sessions because I loved it. We're going to do it again. All right, gang.